Good morning. Welcome to Frank's School. Going on with the Kings and Queens of England, I'm up to episode 3. I'm starting episode 3 now of Alan Herrera's Kings and Queens of England. Now, some things before I go on to this. I had mentioned gunpowder, or I think I had, that gunpowder had arrived as a weapon, and that changed everything on the battlefield. Oh, yes. And I did a little bit of research about that, a little bit, because I've often wondered about that. Explosives. I looked into the history of explosives, and gunpowder especially. I was interested in the fact that urine was an ingredient of gunpowder to get saltpeter, whether from cattle or humans as well. And I'd often think about, wow, collecting all that and so much work to get an explosion. But I also think in terms of kilocalories. I've often been so struck by the waste in energy. I'm talking kilocalories. By World War I and especially World War II, all those weapons to build them, all those explosions, what a waste. And on that subject of warfare, in a way that's so crazy that I would speculate on, why is there war? Or just is war? Well, I left out hatred. Hatred is also a factor. There comes to a point where it builds on itself, I think. I have reason, certainly my mother had reason to hate the Germans, but I don't. But why? Well, because a German pilot killed my mother's brother. That's the war. And it's the centralization of these emotions, fear, pride, that I was talking about. That's what I puzzle about. But I don't want to go back into that right now. I have Shakespeare here again because I think I failed to mention that Henry VI, he also wrote, I think, part 1 and part 2 of a play called Henry VI. So I should have put a check mark by Henry VI. I don't know that play really at all. And Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Now, I was an English major, not a history major. And it was back around this time, a little bit earlier, that this great poem, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, was written. And written, too, not just spoken, as the earlier stuff had been done. Like Beowulf had, for the longest time, was not written. But this was written. Rhyme, by now, had arrived in Europe, and they think that it came from the Arabic cultures. Chaucer wrote during that time, just after the Black Death, so in a sense we were already passing the time of this fabulous writer. All right, and another thing that was going on in the meantime, I was thinking, so what's going on in Germany at this time? Well, the Hanseatic League. I knew so little about that. As I've said before, I'm a fairly well-educated American. But, and so no doubt to many Europeans, it would just be unbelievable that we would not know these things. Yeah, that's the way it is. Anyway, the Hanseatic League was a very major factor in Northern Europe. It was created by guilds. There's that word guild, craftsmen. But these weren't craftsmen exactly. These were merchants. But they organized themselves. They centralized, if you will, and they began to work together. And that was in almost a form of government. It is so different, really. The experience of Northern Europe was quite different from that of England. Well, you're going to hear about Eleanor Butler. Let me get the right Edward here. Edward the Fourth. Yeah, Edward the Fourth. Promised to marry her. I hope I had this right. Had 5 kids. Did marry Elizabeth Woodville. I'm writing these down partly so you can go check them out, look them up easier, catch the names. I'm taking notes for you if you wish. She was a commoner, and this seems to have been a marriage of love. Amazing. For the first time ever, kings and queens didn't really have that option. I had better get into that. Historically, often marriage was not about love. Richard III, Duke of Gloucester. Now there, of course, is is a Shakespearean play. As a matter of fact, Shakespeare is described in this as the propagandist of the Tudors, which are the next, after the Plantagenets. The Tudors are going to be the series of kings and queens, or queen. Portrayed as such a bad guy by Shakespeare. Well, you know, history seems to suggest that maybe he wasn't as bad as portrayed. This, however, is a great play, I think. Even it's too bad if it does him wrong, if it treats him falsely. But he is Shakespeare's ultimate villain. And you know, the Shakespearean troupe in Bedford, the high school club, informal club, we didn't actually put it on. We were going to put it on. And the boy, now of course a man, that was going to portray Richard III, he finally did perform the opening speech. That's where you get, "Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of York." And on it goes, where Richard says that he knows he's a villain and he's going to be a villain. That's an amazing speech, and he delivered it amazingly. The boy, grown up to be a man, is now a linguist in the Air Force. He was brilliant. Anyway, now then you're going to hear about Henry VII, and then when you get to Henry VIII, I didn't put the time on there. What is that time? I'd like you to stop at, I think it's 1947, at the 19th minute 47 second. That's where I'd like you to stop before we get into Henry VIII, because finally, for those that know some of the, just a little of English history, you're going to begin to hit stuff that, aha, yes, I know about that stuff, and that helps. Something the Battle of Bosworth, or Bosworth Field maybe, that's where he was killed. A horse, my kingdom for a horse, are the lines that Shakespeare gives him before he's killed, Richard III. Henry VII's chapel is not mentioned. But I looked into that too, because I was there once and, you know, blown away by it. The ceiling with the pendant, what do you call it, vault, or fan vault ceiling. Amazing at Westminster Abbey. And that's an excuse for me to remind you that I say there's another kind of version of the past besides history. You know, we just latch onto history and use the word history when we mean the past, but there's also the record left by human hands and muscles and the craftsmen. And you know, I had the unbelievable experience, really. A boy who was traveling with me in Europe on one of the tours, and I came across it when they were restoring the top of Henry VII's chapel. And we were able to actually get in an elevator as tourists and go up to the top and talk with stonemasons that were setting stones at the top of it. B.J. Medore, yeah, he and I. That was something to be able to see that. Well, anyway, I want to mention it because, again, if you ever go to London as a tourist, of course you'll go to Westminster Abbey, but don't skip his chapel. It's right there, part of it, really. Perkin Warbeck, a pretender to the throne. These names are so unfamiliar to Americans that I thought I'd write that down. I think he said Court of the Star Chamber. I didn't look that up again yet. And another thing I want to say, there's no way that you're going to keep this straight. On first hearing, unless you're some kind of genius that I'm not, the second time, I watched it twice, studying it intensely both times. The second time, I could sort of follow it. But I don't know if that has to matter that much, that you get every single part right. You know, we're working our way down through there, and my purpose is not to have you at the end of this be able to say, oh, I know the kings and queens of England. No, it's they will have given us a pathway through the past. All right, see you tomorrow.